2 years. 2 whole years I celebrated that little girl's birthday, bought her Christmas presents, and watched her take her first steps. 2 years I held my best friend's hand through sleepless nights and diaper changes. 2 years I never questioned why she looked so much like my husband. Until I found the DNA test results hidden in his sock drawer. The results that proved my husband was the father of my best friend's child. But that was just the beginning of what I discovered. The affair, the lies, the secret family they built while I struggled with infertility. It was all so much worse than I could have ever imagined. I'm Seraphina. I'm 32 years old, and this is my story. 3 years ago, I was living what I thought was the perfect life. My husband Caspian and I had been married for 4 years. We'd been trying to have a baby for 2 years with no luck, but we remained hopeful. We had a beautiful home in the suburbs, successful careers, and my best friend Ottilie lived just 10 minutes away in a cute apartment downtown. Ottilie and I had been inseparable since our sophomore year of college. We met in a literature class and bonded over our shared love of Jane Austen and terrible reality TV. She was the sister I never had, the person who knew all my secrets and never judged me for them. She was there for everything: my wedding day when I was a nervous wreck and spilled coffee on my dress, my promotion to senior marketing director when I needed someone to celebrate with champagne and embarrassing dancing, and especially during my 2 miscarriages when I felt like my body was betraying me. She had a key to our house and the alarm code. She'd show up with wine and takeout whenever I was having a bad day at work. When Caspian was traveling for business, she'd come over and we'd have movie marathons and eat way too much ice cream. She was woven into the fabric of our daily life in a way that felt completely natural and comforting. Ottilie had been single for most of the time I'd known her. She'd had a few casual relationships. There was Marcus from her gym who turned out to be boring, and David from her work who ended up being too clingy. But nothing serious ever developed. She always said she was waiting for the right person, that she didn't want to settle for someone just because she was lonely. "I want what you and Caspian have," she'd tell me over our Tuesday coffee dates. "That deep connection, that partnership. I'm not going to compromise on that." Meanwhile, she'd spend almost every weekend at our place. She'd join us for holiday celebrations, come to Caspian's work parties as our plus one, and even had her own stocking hanging on our fireplace at Christmas. Caspian would joke that when you married me, you got Ottilie as part of the package deal. I thought it was sweet how well they got along. They'd gang up on me when picking movies, always choosing action films over my beloved romantic comedies. They'd cook together when I was working late, and I'd come home to elaborate dinners and the two of them laughing about some inside joke from their cooking adventure. I never saw their friendship as a warning sign. I was grateful that my husband and best friend liked each other. It made my life easier and more harmonious. I had no idea I should have been worried about how comfortable they'd become with each other. Then everything changed when Ottilie told me she was pregnant. It was a Tuesday in March, and we were having our usual coffee date at Brewster's, our favorite little cafe downtown. The place where we'd spent countless hours over the past decade, sharing dreams and disappointments, celebrating successes and mourning failures. Ottilie looked different that day, nervous in a way I'd never seen before. She kept fidgeting with her phone, checking the time, and stirring her latte without drinking it. This was unusual because she was obsessed with Brewster's caramel macchiatos and would normally finish hers before I was halfway through my cappuccino. "You're making me nervous," I told her, laughing. "What's going on? Did you get fired? Are you moving? Are you sick?" She took a deep breath and looked me straight in the eyes. "Sarah, I need to tell you something, and I honestly don't know how you're going to react." My stomach immediately dropped. In my experience, conversations that started that way never ended well. My first thought was that she had cancer or some other terrible health diagnosis. Or maybe she'd gotten a job offer in another city and was moving away. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between us for what felt like an eternity. I stared at her, processing what she just said, trying to reconcile this news with everything I knew about her life. Pregnant? I repeated, like I needed to hear the word again to make it real. She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. I was shocked, but not in a bad way. Despite the pang of jealousy that immediately hit me, here was my best friend, who wasn't even trying to get pregnant, achieving what I'd been desperately wanting for years. I was genuinely happy for her. Oh my God, Ottilie! That's incredible news! I reached across the table and grabbed her hands. You're going to be such an amazing mother. I can't believe it. How far along are you? When did you find out? But instead of the excitement I expected to see, she looked miserable. About 8 weeks. I found out last week, and I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. Why would you be worried about telling me? This is wonderful. She pulled her hands away and looked down at the table. Because it's complicated, Sarah. Really complicated. What do you mean complicated? Are you worried about being a single mom? Because you know Caspian and I will help you with whatever you need. We're going to be the best aunt and uncle ever. She started crying then, which confused me even more. Who's the father? I asked gently. Is it someone I know? That guy from your marketing team you mentioned a few times? She shook her head vigorously. No, it's not him. It's... God, this is so hard to say. The father is married, Sarah. He's married, and he doesn't know about the baby. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I'm going to raise the baby on my own. I felt a wave of protectiveness wash over me. My best friend had gotten involved with a married man who'd presumably used her and left her to deal with the consequences alone. What a piece of garbage, I said immediately. Who is this guy? How long were you seeing him? Why didn't you tell me? I can't tell you who he is. I won't ruin his marriage over this. It was a moment of weakness for both of us. We're not together, we're never going to be together, and I don't want his money or his help. I just want to move forward and raise this baby. I reached across the table again and squeezed her hand. Hey, look at me. I'm going to support you no matter what, okay? You don't have to do this alone. You have me, and you have Caspian. We're going to help you through everything: doctor's appointments, baby shopping, middle of the night emergencies, all of it. This baby is going to be so loved. She started sobbing then, and I moved around to her side of the booth to hug her. I thought she was crying from relief that I wasn't judging her for the situation. Looking back now, I think she was crying because she knew she was lying to my face about something that would eventually destroy our friendship and my marriage. Thank you, she whispered against my shoulder. I don't know what I'd do without you. Neither of us knew then that she'd already done something that would ensure she'd have to find out. When I told Caspian that night over dinner, his reaction was immediate and surprisingly intense. I'd expected him to be supportive. He'd always liked Ottilie, but maybe a little concerned about how this would affect our own family planning timeline or our finances if we were going to help support her. Instead, he was immediately and enthusiastically invested in ways that should have raised massive red flags. That's incredible news, he said, putting down his fork and giving me his full attention. Ottilie's going to be such a great mother. She's so nurturing and patient. This baby is going to be lucky to have her. I'm glad you're happy about it, I said. I was worried you might think it would complicate things for us, you know, with our own trying. No, not at all. If anything, this could be really good for us. We'll get to be around a baby, learn the ropes a little bit. And Ottilie will need our support. Then he started talking about practical things in a way that seemed oddly specific and well thought out for someone who just learned the news 30 seconds earlier. We should start thinking about how we can help her. Should we convert the guest room into a nursery for when she needs babysitting? I can research the best pediatricians in the area. We'll want to make sure she has good insurance coverage. And we should probably start a college fund for the baby early, while we can make smaller contributions that will compound over time. I was touched by how caring and forward-thinking he was being, but there was something about his immediate jump to long-term planning that felt unusual. It was like he'd already been thinking about these things before I'd even told him Ottilie was pregnant. "You've really thought about this," I observed. "Well, Ottilie's family to us," he said quickly. "Of course I want to make sure she and the baby have everything they need." That night, as we were getting ready for bed, Caspian brought up the pregnancy again. "Did she tell you anything about the father?" he asked, trying to sound casual while brushing his teeth. "Just that he's married and doesn't know about the baby. She doesn't want to tell me who it is because she doesn't want to ruin his marriage." Caspian was quiet for a long moment. "That's probably for the best. Some things are better left alone." Looking back, I can see that he was testing the waters, trying to understand how much Ottilie had told me and whether he needed to worry about his cover being blown. At the time, I thought he was just being thoughtful about a complicated situation. "I'm proud of her for making the mature choice," I said. "It would be easy to try to blow up this guy's life out of anger or spite, but she's taking the high road." "Yeah," Caspian agreed quietly. "She's handling it really well." What I didn't know was that handling it well meant they'd already agreed on a plan to deceive me for as long as possible while they figured out how to transition into the family they really wanted to be. The next 9 months were the strangest, most emotionally complicated period of my life, though I didn't fully understand why at the time. Ottilie essentially moved in with us, spending almost every evening at our house and most weekends too. "It's just easier," she'd explain when I'd ask if she was comfortable staying over so much. "Your house is bigger, you guys take such good care of me, and honestly, I get lonely in my apartment. Being pregnant and single is harder than I expected." Caspian threw himself into taking care of her with an intensity that I found both admirable and slightly overwhelming. He became obsessed with pregnancy nutrition, reading books and articles about what foods were best for fetal development. He'd come home from work with bags full of organic produce, prenatal vitamins, herbal teas, and expensive supplements. "The baby's brain development happens so quickly during the second trimester," he'd explain while unpacking groceries that I didn't remember adding to our shopping list. "We want to make sure Ottilie has everything she needs for optimal nutrition." He'd cook elaborate meals specifically designed around her pregnancy needs and cravings. When she mentioned wanting something spicy, he'd research the safest hot sauces for pregnant women. When she said she was craving fruit, he'd come home with exotic options like dragon fruit and passion fruit that she'd never even tried before. I was proud of him for being so supportive, but there were moments when his level of investment felt almost possessive. He'd get genuinely upset if Ottilie skipped meals or didn't take her vitamins. He'd research her doctor's recommendations and come prepared with questions about things she hadn't even mentioned to us. "How do you know she needs to increase her iron intake?" I asked one day when he came home with a specific iron supplement. "I've been reading about second trimester nutritional needs," he said. "All pregnant women need more iron around this time." But it felt like more than general knowledge. It felt personal and specific in a way that I couldn't quite articulate. The strangest part was how Caspian and Ottilie had developed this shorthand communication that excluded me. They'd have these intense, quiet conversations that would immediately stop when I entered the room. When I'd ask what they were discussing, they'd give vague answers about doctor's appointments or work stress. "Just talking about whether she should switch to a different OB practice," Caspian would say. "Just asking his advice about a client situation," Ottilie would add. But their body language was wrong. They'd be standing closer than friends typically stand, or they'd both look guilty when I interrupted, or they'd overcompensate afterward by being extra chatty about completely unrelated topics. Caspian started working late more frequently, which he explained as putting in extra hours to save money for all the ways we'd be helping Ottilie once the baby arrived. "I want to make sure we can afford to really support her," he'd say. "Babies are expensive, and she's going to be doing it alone." It made perfect sense. I was proud of him for thinking ahead and making financial sacrifices for our friend. I had no idea that his late nights at work were actually spent with Ottilie, planning their secret life together. The most unsettling thing was how Caspian seemed to know intimate details about Ottilie's pregnancy that she hadn't shared with me. He'd ask about doctor's appointments before she'd mentioned having them. He'd know about symptoms she was experiencing before she'd complained about them to either of us. "How did you know her back was bothering her?" I asked one evening after he'd suggested she use a heating pad. "She mentioned it earlier when you were in the bathroom," he said quickly. But I'd been gone for maybe 2 minutes, and they hadn't been talking when I left the room. "How did you know she had a craving for those specific pickles?" I asked another time when he came home with an unusual brand that she'd never mentioned wanting. "Lucky guess," he said with a laugh. "Pregnant women love pickles, right?" But it wasn't just pickles. It was specific brands, specific flavors, specific combinations of foods that she hadn't expressed interest in around me. It was like he had access to information about her pregnancy that I didn't have, despite the fact that I was supposedly her primary support system. When I'd point out these coincidences, he always had reasonable explanations. But the frequency of his insider knowledge was becoming impossible to ignore, even though I couldn't quite put my finger on why it bothered me so much. When Ottilie went into labor at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, Caspian and I rushed to the hospital together. I was so nervous and excited that I could barely sit still in the car. We'd been anticipating this moment for months, and I felt like I was about to become an aunt to the most important baby in the world. "Are you okay?" Caspian asked as we hurried through the hospital parking lot. "I'm just emotional," I said, wiping away tears. "I can't believe she's finally going to be here." "I know," he said quietly. "Everything's about to change." Looking back, I think he meant that in a very different way than I understood at the time. Ottilie had specifically requested that both Caspian and I be in the delivery room with her. She said she needed her family there, and we were the closest thing she had to family. The labor was long and difficult, nearly 18 hours from start to finish. We took turns holding her hand, bringing her ice chips, and trying to keep her calm during the worst contractions. Caspian was incredibly attentive in a way that seemed to go beyond normal friendship. He'd anticipate what she needed before she asked for it. He knew exactly how to massage her back when the pain got intense. He seemed to have an intuitive understanding of how to comfort her that was almost parental in its tenderness. When little Marlo finally arrived, the room filled with this overwhelming sense of joy and relief. She was absolutely perfect, tiny and red and wrinkled, with a full head of thick, dark hair and these incredible blue eyes that seemed far too alert for a newborn. When the nurse placed Marlo in Ottilie's arms for the first time, I started crying so hard that I could barely see. This beautiful little person was finally here, safe and healthy, and she was going to be such a huge part of our lives. But then something happened that should have made me question everything. The nurse, who had been busy cleaning up and checking Marlo's vital signs, turned to Caspian with a warm smile. "Would Dad like to hold her now?" The room went completely silent for a moment. Then all three of us started talking at once. "Oh, he's not the father," Ottilie said quickly. "Just a friend," Caspian added, but his voice sounded strained. "We're the honorary aunt and uncle," I explained to the nurse, laughing nervously. The nurse apologized profusely, saying she just assumed since we were both there and Caspian had been so involved in the labor process. But in that moment of awkward correction, I caught something that I should have paid more attention to. There was a look between Caspian and Ottilie, just a fraction of a second, but it was loaded with meaning that I wasn't part of. It was the look of two people sharing a secret, two people who were connected by something deeper than friendship. When Caspian finally did hold Marlo, he seemed to transform. His whole body relaxed in a way I'd never seen before. He cradled her with this natural confidence that surprised me, supporting her head perfectly and swaying slightly in a rhythm that immediately calmed her fussing. "You're a natural," Ottilie said, and there was something in her voice that sounded like pride. "She's beautiful," Caspian whispered, staring down at Marlo with an expression of pure love. "Absolutely perfect." I took a photo of the three of them together, Caspian holding Marlo while Ottilie watched from her hospital bed, both of them glowing with happiness. It was such a tender, beautiful moment that I immediately posted it on social media with the caption, "Our chosen family just got bigger. Welcome to the world, baby Marlo." Looking at that photo now, I can see what I missed then. The way Caspian was looking at Marlo wasn't the expression of a family friend meeting a baby for the first time. It was the expression of a father holding his daughter. And Ottilie wasn't watching a friend bond with her child, she was watching the father of her baby meet his daughter in a room where his wife was completely oblivious to the truth. I had posted a photo of a family reunion disguised as a friendship moment, and I had no idea. The first 2 years of Marlo's life were the most emotionally complex period I'd ever experienced. Every day brought a mixture of pure joy and deep sadness that I couldn't fully explain to myself. The joy came from watching this incredible little person develop her personality, hit her milestones, and become the center of our world. Marlo was an easy baby who grew into a delightful toddler. She was curious about everything, incredibly affectionate, and had this infectious laugh that could improve anyone's mood instantly. The sadness came from the constant reminder that she wasn't mine. Every milestone, her first smile, her first tooth, her first word, her first steps, was a celebration of someone else's motherhood while I continued to struggle with my own fertility journey. Ottilie was a wonderful mother, but she relied on us heavily for support, especially during those exhausting early months. We were at her apartment almost every single day, helping with feedings, diaper changes, bath time, and just providing company during the long, lonely hours of new motherhood. What struck me as unusual was how naturally Caspian took to the caretaking role. He wasn't just helpful, he was intuitive in a way that seemed to go beyond friendship or even typical uncle behavior. He'd get up in the middle of the night when Marlo was crying, even when we were just visiting for dinner and planned to go home afterward. He'd walk her around Ottilie's apartment, singing these little made-up lullabies that seemed to work like magic. No matter how upset Marlo was, Caspian could always calm her down. He knew exactly how to prepare her bottles, the right temperature, the right amount, the specific way she liked to be held while eating. He could change her diapers efficiently and without complaint, something that many men struggle with even when it's their own children. Most impressively, he could get Marlo to sleep when no one else could. He had this specific routine of gentle bouncing and humming that would knock her out within minutes, even during her fussiest periods. "You're going to be such a great dad someday," Ottilie would tell him, watching him work his magic on a cranky Marlo. "I hope so," he'd reply, but there was something in his tone that suggested he wasn't thinking about someday, he was thinking about right now. As our fertility treatments continued to fail, I started to feel like I was living in some alternate universe where I was co-parenting someone else's child while desperately trying to have my own. I loved Marlo deeply, she felt like my own daughter in many ways, but every night I'd go home to our quiet house and wonder if we'd ever fill it with our own family. Meanwhile, Caspian seemed less invested in our fertility journey as time went on. He'd forget appointment dates that used to be circled on our calendar. He'd seem distracted during counseling sessions that he used to approach with focus and determination. When our doctor suggested more aggressive treatments, Caspian would suggest we take breaks or consider other options. "Maybe we should just see what happens naturally for a while," he'd say after a particularly disappointing IVF cycle. All this medical intervention is stressing us both out. I thought he was emotionally exhausted from our struggles, but now I realize he was already a father. He didn't need our treatments to work because he already had Marlo, and every month that our attempts failed was another month closer to the day when he could stop pretending and start living his real life. As Marlo grew from a baby into a toddler, the physical resemblances became impossible to ignore, though I continued to rationalize them away. Her hair grew in thick and wavy, exactly like Caspian's unruly curls that he was always trying to tame with product. She had these piercing blue eyes that were identical to my husband's, not just the color, but the shape and the way they crinkled when she smiled. When she was concentrating on something, stacking blocks or trying to fit shapes into a puzzle, she'd get this intensely focused expression that was pure Caspian. She'd furrow her brow and purse her lips in exactly the same way he did when he was working on a difficult project at work. Most telling of all was a little dimple in her chin that appeared when she smiled or laughed. Caspian had the exact same dimple, and I'd always thought it was one of his most distinctive features. When I first noticed it on Marlo, I mentioned it to Ottilie. "She has the same chin dimple as Caspian," I said, pointing it out while Marlo giggled at something on TV. "Really?" Ottilie said, not looking up from her phone. I hadn't noticed. But how could she not have noticed? It was so prominent and distinctive. Unless she was deliberately not noticing because she knew exactly where it came from. The most significant development came when Marlo started talking. Her language development followed a pattern that should have been a massive red flag, but I explained it away with the same rationalization I used for everything else. Her first word was mama, spoken clearly while looking directly at Ottilie. We celebrated with champagne and took about 1,000 photos. Ottilie cried with joy and pride, and I felt genuinely happy for her, despite the pang of longing I always felt when witnessing these motherhood moments that I desperately wanted for myself. But Marlo's second word was dada, and she said it while pointing directly at Caspian. "Dada," she said with absolute confidence, reaching her arms toward him. Ottilie immediately corrected her, laughing in a way that sounded forced. "That's Uncle Caspian, sweetie. Uncle Caspian." But Marlo wasn't confused. She kept calling him Dada with the same certainty she used for Mama. No matter how many times we corrected her, she'd point at Caspian and say Dada like she knew something we were pretending not to know. "She's just confused because you're the main man in her life right now," Ottilie would explain when people asked about it. "You're here so much and you take such good care of her, it makes sense she'd see you as a father figure." It did make logical sense. But there was something about Marlo's certainty that felt like more than confusion. She never called any other man Dada, not the mailman, not Ottilie's male coworkers, not my brother when he visited. Just Caspian. Always Caspian. And I noticed that Caspian never seemed bothered by the mislabeling. In fact, his whole face would light up every time she said it. Instead of correcting her himself, he'd let Ottilie do it while he smiled like he was holding on to a secret that made him incredibly happy. The truth came out in the most mundane way imaginable. I was doing laundry on a Saturday morning while Caspian was at the gym, just going through our normal weekend routine. When I got to his dresser to put away his clean socks, I noticed that the drawer was completely overstuffed and wouldn't close properly. I started reorganizing, trying to make everything fit neatly, when my fingers brushed against a piece of paper at the very back of the drawer. I pulled it out, thinking it was probably just a receipt he'd forgotten about or maybe some warranty information for an appliance. Instead, I found myself staring at a document that made my entire world collapse in an instant. It was a DNA test result. The names on the document were printed in stark black letters, Caspian Thorne and Marlo Chin. And below that, in bold text that seemed to burn into my retinas, 99.97% probability of paternity. There was a lab receipt stapled to the back, dated just 3 weeks earlier. The timing made sense. Ottilie had been pressuring him to finally tell me the truth, and he'd gotten the test as proof. I sat down hard on our bed, holding the paper with shaking hands. Everything that had felt strange or coincidental over the past 3 years suddenly clicked into place with perfect, horrible clarity. Every time Caspian had seemed to know things about Marlowe's development before Ottilie told us. Every quiet conversation that stopped when I entered the room. Every moment when Marlowe had called him Dada with such confidence. Every time he'd been able to calm her when no one else could. He wasn't just good with children. He wasn't just a natural caretaker. He was her father. My husband was Marlowe's father. My best friend had been lying to my face for 3 years. The child I'd helped raise, the child I'd grown to love like my own daughter, was the product of an affair between the two people I trusted most in the world. I felt like I was going to be sick. I couldn't catch my breath. I kept reading the document over and over again, hoping I was misunderstanding something, hoping there was some other explanation for why my husband's DNA would match with Marlowe's unless there wasn't another explanation. The magnitude of the deception was overwhelming. This wasn't just an affair that had ended. This was an ongoing lie that required daily maintenance and coordination. Every single day for 3 years, both of them had looked me in the eye and pretended to be people they weren't. Every time Caspian had held me while I cried about our fertility struggles, he knew he'd already successfully fathered a child with someone else. Every time Ottilie had comforted me during failed IVF cycles, she knew the man I was trying to have a baby with had already had a baby with her. Every milestone I'd celebrated with Marlowe, every birthday party I'd planned, every holiday outfit I'd bought her, every bedtime story I'd read, I'd been celebrating my husband's secret daughter while remaining completely oblivious to the truth. I don't know how long I sat there holding that paper. It could have been minutes or hours. Time seemed to have stopped completely. Eventually, I heard Caspian's car pulling into the driveway, and panic shot through me like electricity. I quickly put the document back exactly where I'd found it, making sure the socks were arranged the same way they'd been before. I tried to compose myself, but my hands were still shaking and my heart was pounding so hard I was sure he'd be able to hear it. He walked into our bedroom like it was any other Saturday, sweaty from his workout and in a good mood. He kissed me hello and asked about my morning, and I managed to respond normally while screaming internally. "Just doing some cleaning," I said, proud of how normal my voice sounded. "How was the gym?" "Good workout. I'm going to grab a shower, and then maybe we can go see Ottilie and Marlowe this afternoon." Of course he wanted to see them. He wanted to spend time with his daughter. "Sure," I said. "That sounds nice." That night, I lay awake next to him, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the magnitude of what I'd discovered. This man who'd been my partner for 6 years, who I'd trusted with my deepest fears and dreams, had been living an elaborate double life. How many times had he left our bed to go comfort Marlowe when she was crying during sleepovers? How many times had he kissed me goodbye in the morning and gone straight to Ottilie's apartment? How many times had we made love while he was thinking about the child he'd had with another woman? The betrayal wasn't just the affair, though that was devastating enough. It was 3 years of systematic deception. 3 years of watching me bond with his child while pretending she meant nothing more to him than she did to me. 3 years of lying about the most fundamental aspects of his identity while I trusted him completely. But there was something else that was almost worse than the betrayal itself, the realization that I'd been living in a completely false reality. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my friendships, and my family was built on lies. I'd spent 3 years feeling inadequate because I couldn't get pregnant while my husband was perfectly capable of fathering children, just not with me. I'd spent 3 years supporting my best friend through single motherhood while she was actually co-parenting with my husband. I'd spent 3 years celebrating another woman's child while unknowingly contributing to the deception that was destroying my own life. And Marlowe. Sweet, innocent Marlowe, who was about to lose the only stable family structure she'd ever known because her parents had built their relationship on lies and betrayal. The next morning, I knew I had to confront them. I couldn't continue living this lie, not even for one more day. I decided to confront Ottilie first. I thought she might be more likely to tell me the truth, or at least give me her version of events before I talked to Caspian. When I showed up at her apartment and told her I knew the truth, the color drained from her face instantly. She tried to deny it for about 30 seconds before I mentioned the DNA test, and then she collapsed into sobs. The conversation that followed revealed layers of betrayal I hadn't even imagined. The affair hadn't been a one-time mistake. They'd been seeing each other for months before she got pregnant, meeting at hotels when I was out of town for work, spending time together at her apartment when I was working late. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, she kept saying through her tears. We were both just filling a void. But the most devastating revelation was that they'd never actually stopped their relationship. All those conversations about ending things when Marlo was born, all the reassurances that they were just co-parenting, it was all lies. They'd been planning a life together while I was still married to him. When I confronted Caspian that evening, he didn't even try to deny it. He just stood in our kitchen, looking defeated, and asked me what I wanted to know. Everything, I said. I want to know how long you've been lying to me. I want to know how you could watch me struggle with infertility while you had a secret child. I want to know how you could let me love that little girl like my own daughter while knowing she was yours. The conversation that followed lasted hours and revealed the depth of their deception. The affair had started during a particularly stressful period at my job when I was working 60-hour weeks. Caspian felt neglected, Ottilie was lonely, and their friendship had slowly turned into something more over about 4 months. It wasn't planned, he said. You were so stressed and tired, and Ottilie was there. She listened to me. But every detail made it worse. They'd been careful, coordinating their stories so their explanations to me would match. When Marlo was born, they'd agreed to end the romantic relationship and focus on co-parenting while keeping me in the dark. But within 6 months, they were seeing each other again. We kept telling ourselves we'd figure out how to tell you, Caspian said. But there was never a right time. You don't let someone help you raise your secret child while they're desperately trying to have their own baby. I screamed. He told me about the DNA test. Ottilie had been pressuring him to finally tell me the truth. She was tired of the secrecy and wanted them to be a real family. The test was supposed to be proof, but he'd panicked and hidden it. The financial betrayals were extensive too. He'd been supporting Ottilie and Marlo with money from our joint accounts, daycare, medical expenses, rent assistance, all while telling me we needed to be careful because of our fertility treatment costs. I couldn't let my daughter go without, he said, and hearing him call Marlo his daughter out loud made tears flow down my cheeks. That was the moment I realized our marriage was completely over. Not just because of the affair or the lies, but because he'd chosen to be a father to Marlo while refusing to prioritize having children with me. He'd been living the family life he wanted with someone else while letting me believe we were building toward that future together. It's been 8 months since I discovered the truth, and I'm still working through the emotional aftermath. The hardest part isn't just that my marriage ended or that I lost my best friend. It's that I lost my sense of reality for 3 years. I spent that time feeling inadequate and broken, wondering why I couldn't get pregnant while my husband was perfectly capable of fathering children. I spent 3 years celebrating milestones that weren't mine to celebrate, making sacrifices for a child who was already being supported by my husband with our money. Now I look back and I wonder, were these people ever really my family? Or was I just a placeholder in their love story, someone to be managed until they were ready to be together openly?
This is Family or Not, where we share stories that no one wants to talk about at family dinners.